Welcome to CSIS Online. The way we bring you events is changing, but we'll still present live analysis and award-winning digital media from our Dracopolis Ideas Lab, all on your time, live or on demand. This is CSIS Online.
Welcome to this virtual event at CSIS on 5G telecommunications networks. As you know, or should know, 5G is more than phones. It's the next generation of digital networks. The US is not losing or behind in some 5G race. I'm not even sure what a 5G race means, but we are doing very well. And some of that's the work of people we'll have speaking today. But there are things we can do that strengthen and speed the adoption of 5G and its use. We also need to start thinking about what comes after 5G. I've had, since the publication of our report a few days ago, I've had 3 phone calls saying, well, when are you going to do one on 6G? It's like, I just got 5G out of the way, but it is time to start thinking about what comes next. And I know that some of our speakers will address that. Our report, and you got a link in the invitation, lays out recommendations on how to move ahead, to build on the progress that we have made and the strong US private sector, and frankly, a strong regulatory structure that's been a real benefit to us. The report is the product of a group of private sector experts. And to help us think about 5G and next steps, we are honored to have Congresswoman Doris Matsui and acting chairwoman of the Federal Communications Commission, Jessica Rosenworcel. Why am I getting nervous at the end? Acting chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, Jessica Rosenworcel, to speak on 5G and what we are doing, how the nation is making good progress. I'll start by introducing Congresswoman Doris Matsui. Cleet will then briefly introduce acting chairwoman Rosenworcel, and we will then conclude the event. So with that, let me begin. Congresswoman Doris Matsui has represented Sacramento and its surrounding areas since 2005. She's a senior member of the House Energy and Communications Committee, serves as the vice chair of the Communications and Technology Subcommittee, and is a co-chair of the Bipartisan Congressional Spectrum Congress. She's been a leader on promoting the deployment of next generation wireless technologies like 5G. I hope she didn't think her work was over, because we're about to start round 3. And she's authored laws that have facilitated record spectrum breaking auctions. And actually, I know acting chairwoman Rosenworcel will address this, but one of the strengths the US has had is its spectrum auction system, which is the envy of many countries, I can tell you from talking to them. So Congresswoman Matsui's work in legislation has been helpful there. She's an advocate for policies to expand the use of technology across the economy, and is the co-chair of the Bipartisan Congressional High-Tech Caucus. So with that, let us turn to Congresswoman Matsui for her remarks. Then we'll go to Cleet and acting chairwoman Rosenworcel.
Hi to everyone gathering today for the Center for Strategic and International Studies event on U.S. strategy for 5G leadership. You know, I know we'd all prefer to be meeting in person, but by holding virtual events like this, we're doing our part to stop the virus's spread and save lives. As we adapt to changing work environments, virtual events like this are a testament to the continued dedication to advancing the U.S. technological leadership and ensuring we win the race to 5G and beyond. All of us participating in this event recognize that we are at a critical moment. The actions we take now will have far-reaching consequences for years to come. How many people can we connect to the internet? How many jobs can we create? And where will future innovation occur? The rollout of 5G presents new opportunities to shrink rather than expand the digital divide, create new well-paying jobs, and secure our competitive edge. However, realizing these goals will require a concerted effort across industry and the government. We are still in the very early stages of 5G deployment, and the federal government must be a driving force in spectrum policy for the U.S. to remain a global leader in wireless communications technology. And that's why, in January, I wrote to then President-elect Biden, urging him to adopt a unified approach to spectrum policy and a clearly articulated process to resolving interagency disputes. Now, over the past 4 years, significant conflicts between federal agencies caused costly delays in making new spectrum available, while also creating severe uncertainty for federal and non-federal users alike. These frequent and public conflicts encouraged a combative rather than collaborative posture among federal agencies and often required congressional intervention. This approach falls far short of what the U.S. needs to remain the pace setter in 5G. Clear direction from the White House will help provide certainty for the private sector while ensuring agencies have the resources they need to fulfill their mandates. And moving forward, I believe we must reassert NTIA's role as manager of the federal government's use of spectrum and ensure a collaborative decision-making process with the FCC. This approach will also serve another important purpose: shoring up our mid-band deficit. The United States continues to lag behind its international peers in making valuable mid-band spectrum available for commercial use. To help address this problem, I joined with Congressman Guthrie to introduce the bipartisan Spectrum Now Act to provide federal agencies with funding to conduct research on making federal spectrum available for commercial use. This bill will provide our agencies with the resources and certainty they need to free up spectrum across the federal footprint. We know this is vital because we know that there is demand in the market for additional spectrum to fuel the 5G economy. And recently, the FCC concluded the C-band auction, freeing up 280 megahertz of prime mid-band spectrum and raising more than $81 billion in revenue. In Congress, I introduced the WIN 5G Act that required the FCC to conduct a public auction of the spectrum, and these results demonstrate that demand remains strong. However, in addition to freeing up more spectrum, we must also focus on securing our domestic supply chains. Huawei is rapidly emerging as a leading producer of 5G network equipment, which has allowed it to deploy throughout the US, Canada, Europe, and the emerging markets. Now, while Congress has taken meaningful steps to locate and remove vulnerable equipment produced by Huawei and ZTE without viable domestic alternatives, the U.S. has struggled to convince allies that similar steps are necessary in their countries. Now, moving forward, we have the opportunity to diversify the supply chain and create lasting domestic economic opportunities for American workers through the development and deployment of Open RAN technology. Because Open RAN relies on interfaces and hardware built to open standards, new vendors will have an opportunity to interoperate and compete with one another. Now, this additional supply chain diversity will give mobile operators new options when choosing the vendor that best meets their specific needs and facilitate more innovation, faster upgrades, and increase network resiliency. Last Congress, I was an original co-sponsor of the USA Telecommunications Act to authorize a grant program to accelerate the deployment of open, interoperable solutions in 5G networks. The grant program was signed into law last year, and this Congress, I'll be working to ensure it is fully funded. Now, beyond telecommunications equipment, the future of 5G will also be determined by reliable access to semiconductors. Semiconductors represent a strategically important industry for the United States with significant national security and economic implications. Not only will they be vital for next generation 5G networks, but also artificial intelligence and national defense applications. And that's why I joined with Representative McCall and Senators Cornyn and Warner to introduce the CHIPS Act, which will restore semiconductor manufacturing in the U.S. by increasing federal incentives and promoting cutting-edge research and development. Our bipartisan group successfully included the CHIPS Act in NDAA, and last month we met with the President Biden, to discuss ways to reassert U.S. leadership in this space. As we look to the future, it is clear much work remains to be done, but with the continued collaboration encouraged by events like this, I believe that the United States is well positioned to win the race to 5G and beyond. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today, and I definitely look forward to working with everyone on these important issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Matsui. There's a lot to chew on there, and I'm hoping that our next keynote speaker, Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel, will be able to speak to it. It's my profound honor to introduce another extraordinarily influential policymaker in this space, who I first got to know back when she was Jessica, as Commerce Committee Chairman Jay Rockefeller's expert on everything having to do with communications. When I first started working on cybersecurity issues back in 2008, the first thing Senator Rockefeller said is, anything that touches the communications sector, you need to run by Jessica because she knows everything about it. Do not do anything without running it by her. And I think that's absolutely right. Acting Chairwoman Rosenworcel is an exacting lawyer. She's a careful, sure-footed policymaker, and the work that she's done over the past several decades, including as an FCC commissioner and now as acting chair, has done a tremendous amount to promote broadband connectivity, reduce the digital divide, put the internet in schools and libraries, to literally save people's lives by promoting 911 and public safety communications, something that matters to my family and to millions of other families across the country, to push mid-band spectrum. She's been a leader on 5G security and spoke on it. She was our first FCC commissioner to speak at CSIS on these issues. And just yesterday led the FCC to unanimously adopt a notice of inquiry seeking to build a factual record on Open RAN, open radio access networks, technology and deployment. I'm hoping we're going to hear a good bit about that from the acting chairwoman now. But the bottom line is she gets things done, and I think we're about to see a lot of policy being made on these issues to advance 5G and other advanced communications. So, Madam Chair, over to you.
Thank you, and good morning. I really appreciate that the Center for Strategic and International Studies has convened this discussion, and I'm so glad you've asked me to participate. Thank you also for your working group's new report on 5G security. It is full of keen analysis and smart recommendations, and I'm not just saying that because it echoes a lot of our work at the FCC. The quality of this work, of course, isn't much of a surprise, considering my former colleague, Cleet Johnson, was one of the working group's project directors along with Jim Lewis. And it's just great to be here with Cleet, Jim, and everyone else of the CSIS team today. Plus, it's a treat to follow Congresswoman Matsui, especially in a setting where I am not being cross-examined by the House of Representatives Energy and Commerce Committee. She is a thought leader on Capitol Hill, especially when it comes to spectrum policy. She's light years ahead on these issues, and when she speaks, it's always best to pay close attention. So as Clete mentioned, this is actually my second time speaking at CSIS. You hosted me back in early 2019. And I opened those remarks by talking about how timely it was to be holding a discussion about the security of our communications networks, because just days earlier, the Department of Justice had charged a Chinese equipment manufacturer and its chief financial officer with attempting to steal trade secrets. Back then, the presence of network equipment from an untrusted Chinese vendor was viewed as one of the greatest cybersecurity challenges facing the country. And then my predecessor at the FCC in this role spoke to CSIS in early 2021. And that took place 2 weeks after news broke about the SolarWinds breach, which allowed hackers to penetrate the Pentagon, nuclear labs, the State Department, the Department of Homeland Security, and other offices that use the company's network monitoring software. It has been described as the biggest and most sophisticated hack the world has ever seen. So now I find myself speaking to CSIS again on the heels of yet another major cybersecurity story. Last week, Microsoft revealed that security for its Exchange software had been breached, leaving hundreds of banks, healthcare, and government servers vulnerable to hackers. So it's safe to say we've reached a point where we are never that far removed from a new development to remind us that when it comes to cybersecurity, the threats are real, the stakes are high, and our defenses may be insufficient. In other words, we live in an age where talk of cybersecurity and how to improve it is always a timely discussion. And what strikes me is that each of these events unfolded like a scene from a movie. We frantically barricaded the doors only to discover that the threat had been hiding inside the whole time. For years, while we sought to protect ourselves from external threats, untrusted equipment and services had been sitting undisturbed in our nation's commercial networks. Now, let me pause here and make something of a confession. I'm that person that talks back at the television when I'm watching a thriller or suspense film. Maybe I'm not the only one. Some people, they jump, some people close their eyes. I've got ideas about what these ill-fated characters could be doing to improve their fate, and I've got this unabashed proclivity towards sharing them. So today I'm not going to hold that tendency back. I'm going to share 3 different lessons we've all learned from the movies that I think should apply equally to our nation's cybersecurity. Of course, I want to start by recognizing that the cybersecurity challenge is about to get more challenging with the advent of 5G. That's because our 5G future is about connecting everything. As Jim said at the start, it's so much more than phones. It's about moving to a new networked world that will open up possibilities for communications that we can't even fully imagine today. By exponentially increasing the connections between people and things around us, this technology could become an input in everything we do, improving agriculture, education, healthcare, energy, transportation, and more. Now, the data that we derive from all of these connections is powerful, and it is going to inform machine learning, artificial intelligence, and the next generation of innovation across the economy. But building this future right means building security in from the start. That's because this new endless connectivity also means new vulnerabilities. With so much on the line, it's urgent that trustworthy companies build the next generation networks that will soon touch so much in our lives. And it's critical that we take a multifaceted and strategic approach to protecting our networks from all threats. So let's get started. Lesson 1, never split up. It's a terrible idea in horror movies, and it's a terrible idea for cybersecurity too. There's no task at the FCC or in any part of the federal government that is more important than keeping the American people safe. But history demonstrates that no single entity can meet this challenge alone. That's why in my first meeting as acting chairwoman, I committed to working with our federal partners and the private sector to increase the security and resiliency of our nation's communications network. I also made clear my belief that working with like-minded countries and multilateral institutions and building on shared frameworks like the Prague Principles can multiply our strength across the globe. Now, this is more than just rhetoric. In my first few weeks as acting chairwoman, I made it a priority to reach out to my peers and other parts of the federal government to start coordinating and advance our shared interest in network security. These efforts included speaking with present leadership at the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and the Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber and Emerging Technology in the new administration. And while we made it a priority to coordinate externally, whether with other countries or agencies, we need to do the same internally. So I've updated the way that the FCC reviews matters related to national security, which right now are siloed within the agency's various bureaus and offices. If we're going to keep pace with the growing threats to communications, we need a dedicated interagency and cross-bureau team of experts advancing a comprehensive approach to securing our nation's communications. So this team is already hard at work. And that work includes auditing and updating the FCC's capabilities on national security issues, exploring opportunities to collaborate with other federal agencies like the National Science Foundation and the Department of Defense on new 5G test beds, rechartering and rejuvenating the FCC's Communications Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council for our 5G future, and addressing evolving national security risks in the agency's past grants of Section 214 applications, which provide authorization to offer service in the United States. So we expect to have more to announce on each of these fronts soon. So that's lesson one. Let's keep going. Lesson two, don't answer the door. Or to put it more differently, don't let the threat inside your home. When it comes to 5G security, the government's approach to date has focused on slowing down untrusted vendors. We know there are risks that come with using this equipment, and those vulnerabilities could provide foreign interests with access to our networks, jeopardizing the security of communications in the United States. So we've rolled out policies aimed at slowing down the adoption of Huawei and ZTE equipment globally, targeting these companies' practices that allow them to move quickly, and leveling the international playing field. At the FCC, we restricted the use of this equipment by carriers through changes to our Universal Service Fund. And thanks to the Secure and Trusted Communications Networks Act, we're putting the finishing touches on a system to replace insecure equipment from Chinese companies like Huawei and ZTE to the extent that it's present in our domestic networks today. Congress has appropriated $1.9 billion for the FCC to do this work. And in February, at my first meeting as acting chairwoman, the commission launched a proceeding to get that money out the door and get going on this important work. We're broadening our focus from equipment to services too. We previously denied an application from China Mobile to enter our markets and put 4 other similarly situated companies on notice they could share a similar fate. Yesterday, we instituted proceedings to revoke the domestic authority and international authorizations of those 3 companies, China Unicom, Pacific Networks, and ComNet. Finally, we're increasing transparency and information sharing around these issues too. The Secure and Trusted Communications Networks Act requires that the Commission publish and maintain a list of communications equipment and services that pose an unacceptable risk to national security or the security and safety of U.S. persons. Just last week, our Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau released its list of unsafe vendors, which includes Huawei, ZTE, and 3 other Chinese companies identified by Congress. As we continue to update and maintain this list, it will provide meaningful guidance that will ensure that as next generation networks are built across the country, we do not repeat the mistakes of the past. Collectively, I think these actions will help make our communications future more secure. And if we do these things right, we have an opportunity to serve as a model for the rest of the world on how to remove insecure equipment and services from their communications networks. We have the funding, the congressional mandate, the ears of policymakers, and the eyes of the world. So I hope we can make the most of this moment. And that brings up the end. Lesson 3 is to have a backup plan. That's just common sense. Now, I said earlier that the FCC's focus to date has been on slowing down untrusted vendors. But I believe there's another strategy that we should be pursuing at the same time. While we continue to take action to slow down untrusted vendors, we must also take action to speed up American innovation. So to get that effort started, yesterday, the FCC launched the first ever inquiry into open radio access networks, or Open RAN. Now, you heard Congresswoman Matsui talk about this earlier. I think this is important because we have only 4 major vendors for RAN equipment to choose from, none of which hails from the United States. Plus, the vendors that have grown fastest in recent years are from China, in part because the Chinese government deploys powerful industrial policies to make their equipment cheaper to deploy than alternatives. We know, based on a comprehensive record developed by various national security agencies around the world, that there are serious risks that come with having this equipment in our networks. On top of that, the RAN is the most restrictive and most expensive part of the network, in part because all of its major components have to come from the same vendor. Historically, there's been no way to mix and match. So here's the thinking behind Open RAN. If we can unlock the RAN and diversify the equipment in this part of our networks, we may be able to increase security, reduce our exposure to any single foreign vendor, lower costs, and push the equipment market to where the United States is uniquely skilled, and that's software. So that sounds promising. And as the result of our effort, we will have the first comprehensive record on the public interest benefits of new interoperability in the RAN. We will have the first assessment of the state of this technology, how our rules may adjust it to foster its growth, and how our coordination with other federal actors, from the National Science Foundation to the Department of Defense, may stimulate its development in the marketplace. At the same time, I'm proud that we're not shying away from the hard questions. We ask about challenges associated with systems integration and management. We consider reliability and quality of service. We ask whether new openness could also introduce new vulnerabilities to the network. These questions are important to understand whether Open RAN will deliver on its national security promise. Of course, our network equipment is only as good as the spectrum it runs on, so we're not slowing down there either. Yesterday, the FCC took decisive action to pivot to mid-band for 5G. We did that by adopting rules and auction procedures that will make available 100 megahertz of prime mid-band spectrum in the 3.45 to 3.55 gigahertz band. And that will be made available at auction this year. And while we're trying this new spectrum and bringing it to market, we have also included the most aggressive build-out obligations of any spectrum auctioned for 5G to date. We won't just be getting it to the market sooner, we'll be getting it to consumers faster as well. This decision offers tremendous opportunity because during the past few years, the United States was slow relative to other countries to recognize the importance of mid-band spectrum for 5G. This meant we were late to bring these airwaves to market. So mid-band spectrum has been the critical component that is missing, and our action yesterday helps fix that. I think this is all progress we can be proud of. No talking back to the screen required, but we need to continue to talk about network security and the rollout of 5G service at home and abroad. The opportunities for innovation are extraordinary, but the vulnerabilities this connectivity brings deserves attention. And I'm so glad that CSIS is here to provide a forum for discussion, because it's important for the United States to get this right. In fact, I think it's essential for our leadership in a post-pandemic world. Thank you.
Thank you for those insightful and encouraging remarks. I think one of the things that came out in this report is that everyone's very positive. They're positive about what the FCC is doing. I take Congressman Matsui's point about the discussion over releasing more mid-band. We know there's been a little bit of turbulence on that, but you've actually done pretty well. So I'm looking forward to a good rate of return, a good rate of progress in this area. And of course, the issue that we are all curious about is how will people make use of 5G? Right before we got on the call, I was talking about being in Korea, where they have remarkable 4G speeds, and it changes how people behave. You know, it changes what people produce. So this is a new way to create wealth. Khalid, I don't know if you had any final remarks, but we were going to let the acting chairwoman go. She's a little busy, but
no, I think we would love to have her hang around a little bit more,
Yeah.
but I gotta get going.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you,
Oh,
Cleve.
no,
I really
thank you for
appreciate
doing
you.
this.
The
Yeah,
work you do focusing on this. I really do. It's important for
Absolutely.
the United States. Take
You're
care.
doing
you
great
so
work.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think I would just wrap up by saying that I hope everybody can read the report that was the product of a number of I think dozens of private sector experts. It's got a lot of good ideas in them. I think the acting chairwoman and Congresswoman Matsui a lot of those policy ideas are presently being acted on now in Congress and at the FCC. And I'm really looking forward to one of the things that is most exciting about what Jessica said is the interagency and interbureau at the FCC collaboration and cooperation on these issues. I think that's among the most important aspects of this, because you said, Jim, 4G and 5G changes society. It affects all of society. And so it cannot be stovepiped in any one agency. And it needs to be coordinated across the US government and between the private sector and public sector. I think what we've been discussing today moves us down the field on that.
Great. Looking forward to a productive couple of years here as we move ahead. Please read the report if you got a chance. It's the third in a series on 5G. And thank you all for attending today. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye.